The thermostat was still set to 72. That was the first thing I noticed when I unlocked the door using the code she didn't know I remembered. The second thing was the faint scent of eucalyptus, her essential oil diffuser. The one I told her was giving me headaches. The one she packed anyway. Because, of course, she did. The third thing? A half-finished bottle of Pinot Grigio on the kitchen counter and 2 empty wine glasses in the sink. One with lipstick, the other with a smear of barbecue sauce on the rim. I didn't touch anything. I just stood there in my own house, the one I paid for, listening to the muffled sound of waves outside and wondering whether to laugh or scream. Instead, I walked to the upstairs guest bedroom and waited. No lights, no noise, just me and the smell of betrayal seeping through the drywall. I had memorized their route. I had her calendar. I had her fake name on Airbnb. I even knew she used my old Spotify account for the drive down. The Coastal Chill playlist had 6 new plays this week. They thought the house was empty. They thought I was in Chicago visiting my brother. They thought they were clever. They were wrong. And what made it all even more twisted? I wasn't alone. Downstairs, in the living room I designed around her taste, curled up on the couch with a throw blanket, was the one person she never expected me to find, his wife. And if you think this is the part where I say we plotted revenge over wine and candlelight, you're wrong again. Because Isabel, that's her name, didn't want revenge. She wanted answers. And I wanted pain. Not theirs. Mine. I wanted to feel it all. Every ounce of humiliation. Every second of betrayal. Every distorted memory now playing in reverse, mocking me. That's why I invited her here. That's why we both waited. For the door to creak open. For the giggles to echo off the hallway. For the sound of heels on tile. And for 2 people to realize, too late, that they just walked into something they couldn't lie their way out of. I thought Isabel would cry. When I reached out to her 3 days earlier, I expected panic. Maybe some denial. Possibly even a screaming match over the phone. But she was calm. Almost surgical. She said she already knew something was wrong, just not who. Or where. Or how deep. She arrived at the beach house before I did. Wore gray jeans, sneakers, no makeup. Her hair was tied back in a way that said she hadn't slept. When I opened the door and said nothing, she just walked past me and set down a grocery bag like this was a task she'd rehearsed in her head. I brought tea, she said flatly. And batteries. I wasn't sure if the remote still worked. That's when I knew she wasn't here for drama. She was here for evidence. She wanted to see it. Smell it. Sit in the room where it was happening. I offered her the guest room, but she didn't take it. She said she'd sleep on the couch. I didn't argue. I just nodded and walked upstairs. And when I lay in bed that night, in the master bedroom that still had our wedding photo on the nightstand, I cried harder than I ever have in my life. Not because she cheated. Not because I was alone. But because I realized I'd been easy to cheat on. Do you know what that feels like? To be so predictable, so mild, so non-threatening, that someone can lie to your face for months, maybe longer, without ever worrying you'd figure it out? That's the kind of man I was. I sent good night texts while she was unclipping her bra in front of another man. I cooked her lunch while he undid the zipper on her dress. I waited outside her yoga studio while she was in his car across the street. And she never once thought I'd open my eyes. But I did. And now we were both here. Me and Isabel. Waiting like ghosts in a house neither of them deserved to walk through again. The day they were due to arrive, the wind picked up. The ocean was loud. Moody. Isabel didn't speak much. She just sat near the window with a notebook in her lap, occasionally writing things down. I never asked what. I didn't want to know if she was planning a divorce or a crime. I microwaved leftovers and watched condensation form on the windows. At one point, I caught myself straightening the welcome mat at the front door. Like an idiot. Like a husband still trying to make things look nice. At 6:44 p.m., I heard gravel crunching outside. Her laugh. His voice. The sound of their bags hitting the porch. I didn't move. Neither did Isabel. We just listened as the woman I loved, the woman I built this house for, unlocked the door with the key I forgot to change, and walked straight into the trap neither of them saw coming. The moment the door closed behind them, something strange happened. Not panic. Not chaos. Silence. For a few seconds, all I could hear were their footsteps, casual and soft, echoing through the hallway like they belonged there. She always took her shoes off first thing, but this time she didn't. That told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't pretending this time. Not sneaking around. She had crossed into that next phase, the part where betrayal stops hiding. I stood in the hallway upstairs, hidden behind the banister, my heart punching against my ribs like it was trying to escape. Isabel sat still on the couch, legs crossed, her phone turned off and face down next to her. Her hands were clasped together, but her fingers trembled, just slightly. Then I heard his voice. "Smells like cinnamon. Did you light something?" "No," Leon answered, laughing. "Maybe it's just leftover from last time." That laugh. God, that laugh. The one she used with me when she was trying to get out of trouble for something minor. Parking tickets. Messy counters. That same fake innocence now recycled for him. In my house. On my floor. Walking beneath the ceiling I painted with my bare hands. I clenched the railing hard enough to feel the splinters. Isabel didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the archway where they would appear any second. And then they did. She came into view first, holding a bottle of white wine, barefoot now, of course. Her hair was in a bun, messy, deliberate, the kind she knew I liked. She still wore the bracelet I gave her for our 3rd anniversary, the one with our initials engraved in tiny letters along the gold clasp. Then came him, taller than me, predictably tan, loose gray shirt, open collar. He looked relaxed, confident. His hand brushed the small of her back as they walked in together, straight toward the living room. They didn't even notice Isabel until she cleared her throat. It was soft, barely louder than a whisper, but it cut through the air like a gunshot. Leon froze. I don't mean she paused. I mean her whole body went stiff, like a glitch in a simulation. Her left foot still hung in the air mid-step. Her smile dropped so fast I thought her face might break. Chase, that's his name, apparently, looked confused. He turned toward Isabel like she was a hotel guest who wandered into the wrong room. Leon opened her mouth. Nothing came out. I stepped slowly down the stairs. One step, then another. No words. Just the sound of 4 lives unraveling in real time. When I reached the bottom, I didn't look at Leanne. I looked at Chase. He blinked. His throat moved like he was about to speak, but the words never came. Then he noticed Isabel. Really noticed. Her face. Her eyes. And suddenly, all the blood drained from his own. "Isabel," he muttered. "What? What are you?" "You left your wedding ring in the glove compartment," she said calmly. "I figured you'd want it back." She reached into her coat pocket, pulled it out, and placed it on the coffee table like a receipt. Leon turned to me, slowly, like a child realizing she was lost in a crowd. Her voice cracked. "You're here." I finally looked at her, straight in the eyes. "No," I said. "You're here. I never left." The thing about betrayal is, it always thinks it has the upper hand. They thought I would scream. Or maybe cry. Maybe Leon thought I'd just run off into the night and leave them to whatever fantasy they'd built together. Maybe Chase thought Isabel would throw the ring in his face and collapse into some kind of trembling mess. Maybe they both thought this confrontation would be about us hurting them. But I didn't do any of that. I walked across the room and poured myself a glass of water. The silence was excruciating. The only sounds were the hum of the fridge and the waves hitting the shoreline, muffled behind thick glass. I took a sip and finally turned around to face them both, my hand shaking just slightly, enough to embarrass me. "I know everything," I said. "Let's just skip the part where you try to lie." Leon opened her mouth, but Chase, to his credit, didn't even try. He stared at Isabel, like he was trying to will her into disappearing. She just raised an eyebrow and crossed her arms, waiting. I walked closer and placed my glass down on the same table where Isabel had dropped his wedding ring. The 2 objects sat next to each other, one full of clarity, the other a symbol of everything neither of them deserved anymore. "You know what's funny?" I said. "I built this house for peace. I told myself it would fix things. That if we could just get away from the noise, from the distractions, from the city, maybe we'd find our way back to each other." Leanne took a step toward me, her voice soft, shaky. "Please, Alden." "No," I interrupted. "You don't get to use that voice with me anymore. That voice is retired. Dead." I turned to Chase. "Did you at least hesitate? Did either of you stop for even 1 second to think about what this might do to us? Or were you too busy feeling like the stars had aligned over a bottle of my wine?" He didn't answer. His jaw tensed. His eyes darted toward the door, like maybe he thought this was still something he could walk away from. But the door was shut, locked, and there was nowhere else for the truth to hide. Leanne tried again, whispering, It wasn't supposed to mean anything. It just happened. You brought him here. I cut in, sharp this time. To our house. You walked barefoot on the same boards we danced on. You slept in the bed where we planned our future. And you used the key I gave you on the night I told you I loved you more than anything else in this world. She was crying now. Real tears. I knew her well enough to tell the difference. But I didn't care. Not this time. I wanted to tell you, she said. I swear I did, but I thought. You thought I'd fall apart, I said, almost laughing. Like I always do. Like I'm too soft to handle the truth. Isabel finally stood. Her voice was calm, but it sliced the air clean in half. We didn't come here for apologies. We came for clarity. Chase turned toward her, voice raw. Please. Not like this. Exactly like this, she said. You don't get to choose how the truth shows up. I stared at Leanne, the woman I gave everything to, and I felt something inside me shift. Not rage. Not revenge. Just detachment. Like watching a stranger wear your clothes. You've already moved on, haven't you? I asked her. You made me the background character in your own movie, and you didn't even flinch. She didn't answer. Her shoulders collapsed inward. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't there to make her suffer. I was there to set myself free. No one moved for a full minute after I finished speaking. Leanne stood there, stunned. Chase kept glancing between Isabel and the door like a trapped animal. Isabel, meanwhile, sat back down with frightening composure and started flipping through the small notebook she'd brought with her. Page after page turned in near silence, until she stopped on one, tapped it twice with her finger, and looked up. Alden, she said without emotion, are you ready? I nodded slowly. Leanne blinked. Ready for what? I walked to the side table and picked up a brown folder. It had no label, no markings, just a brass fastener holding it shut. I turned to Chase and tossed it at his feet. He flinched as it landed with a flat thud. He didn't pick it up. You might want to take a look, I said. Or not. Doesn't matter. But it's everything. Surveillance footage. Screenshots. GPS pings. Airbnb receipts under your fake name. Even the invoice for the private chef you hired that weekend I was at my mother's funeral. His face dropped like someone had shut off the blood flow to his brain. You hired a chef? Isabel asked, her voice disturbingly light. Wow. I thought you hated cooking. Still, Chase didn't move. Didn't speak. Didn't even breathe in a way I could hear. Leanne, though, she finally snapped. She stormed forward and grabbed the folder, flipping it open with shaking hands. Her eyes scanned the first few pages, then widened, then darted toward me in horror. You, how did you? Why would you? This is insane. I laughed. Actually laughed. The kind that hurts your stomach because you've been holding it in too long. Insane? I asked. What's insane is thinking I wouldn't eventually notice you left your hair straightener on during your business trip. What's insane is using our shared Apple ID and assuming I'd never see your location history. What's insane is cheating on someone who designs floor plans for a living and thinking he wouldn't know every creaking board in the house. She dropped the folder like it burned her. Isabel stood up, calmly walked over, picked it up, and tucked it back under her arm like it was a school essay. Legally, she said softly, this might be useful. Chase finally spoke, voice hoarse. You're both crazy. You set us up. Isabel turned slowly to face him, her expression unreadable. You set yourself up. We just provided lighting. He shook his head like a child refusing to accept bedtime. This is a trap. I stepped forward, closer than I had before, and for the first time looked him right in the eye. This is a mirror. And just like that, the dynamic in the room shifted. Leanne and Chase had walked in expecting stolen moments and wine. What they found was an ambush, not loud, not violent, but precise, calculated, and, worst of all, documented. Leanne tried again, her voice quieter now. So what happens next? What? You post this online. You tell everyone? I shook my head. No. I'm not interested in public humiliation. I'm interested in you knowing that I saw everything. That I heard everything. That while you laughed behind my back, I was already 10 steps ahead. She looked like she might collapse, but Isabel stepped in. You know the worst part? She asked them both. We're still being kind. Leanne looked at me like she didn't recognize who I was anymore. And maybe she didn't. Because for the first time in our marriage, I wasn't begging for answers. I was handing them over. She didn't fall to her knees. She didn't scream or beg or deny. Instead, Leanne did the one thing I never expected. She apologized. Not in some grand, collapsing, mascara running away. Not the kind of apology you see in movies, where someone clutches their chest and sobs that they made a mistake. No, hers was worse than that. It was cold, surgical. "I'm sorry," she said, finally lifting her eyes to meet mine. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I just stopped feeling like myself in this marriage." There it was. That slick, polished, post-therapy line that cheats its way past guilt. It wasn't about what she did. It was about how she felt. It was about her identity, her journey, her disconnection. As if I'd accidentally wandered into someone else's story and made myself the villain by loving too hard. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I walked to the kitchen and gripped the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. Isabel sat back down on the couch again, watching Leanne like a detective waiting for a suspect to slip up. Chase stood near the wall now, silent, his arms crossed like a teenager being scolded. Leanne took a step closer. "You don't understand what it's like to feel invisible next to someone who never stops watching you. I felt like I was being smothered by your love. That one broke me. I didn't let it show, but it broke something deep inside. I watched you," I said, slowly, carefully, "because I believed in you. Because you were my person. Because I thought protecting you was the most important thing I could do with my life." She didn't respond. She just looked relieved, like finally getting to say this made it real for her. Justified. Chase was still dead silent. He didn't even try to defend her. He just stared at the floor, which somehow made it worse. Isabel stood up and walked over to me. She didn't touch me, didn't say anything. She just stood there beside me, quietly, like an anchor keeping me from floating away into madness. I turned to Leanne. "You could have told me. You could have left. You could have yelled, cried, fought, done anything except this." She nodded, wiping her cheek. "I know. I was weak." Weak. That word again. They always call it weakness after they've detonated everything and found themselves standing in the ashes. It's a graceful way of saying, "I didn't have the courage to be decent." Chase suddenly spoke. First time in 20 minutes. "Look, man," he muttered. "I didn't come here to be judged. We didn't plan this to hurt you." I turned slowly, and my voice dropped. "You came to my house. You drank my wine. You wore my robe. You touched my wife. And then you told yourself it wasn't personal?" He looked away again. "Of course he did. I don't care if you leave together or separately," I said. "I don't care if you text me tomorrow or never again. But you don't get to pretend this was a misunderstanding. You both knew exactly what you were doing." Leanne whispered something, barely audible. I didn't catch it. "What?" I asked. She looked up, and her eyes were full of something I couldn't place. Not regret. Not even shame. Something colder. "I just didn't think you had it in you," she said. And there it was. The truth behind everything. She thought I'd never find out. And even if I did, I'd be too soft, too kind, too emotionally fragile to do anything but crumble. But instead, I stood there, eyes wide open, and held up the mirror. And for the first time, she looked like the weak one. The thing about people like Leanne is, they think consequences are optional. They treat betrayal like a private act, like something that happens inside a bubble where no one's watching and no one's keeping score. They believe damage can be contained. That if they offer enough clean sentences, enough rehearsed apologies, they can still walk away with the dignity they buried months ago. But the problem is, they always forget one thing. Leanne forgot. I waited until the tension simmered just low enough that everyone assumed it was over. Isabel had gone silent again, staring out the window with that notebook still balanced on her knees. Chase was pacing slowly near the fireplace like a man who thought movement could somehow erase what had happened. And Leanne was perched on the armrest of the couch, breathing in shallow, guilty rhythms, like she was preparing for the exit. That's when I walked upstairs and came back down with a small black box. Not a metaphorical one, an actual box. When I placed it on the coffee table, everyone froze. "You remember this?" I said, looking straight at Leanne. "You told me it was an old jewelry case from college, that there were some earrings inside you didn't want to lose. You asked me not to touch it." Her face went pale. She opened her mouth, closed it again. "I didn't touch it," I continued, "until last week. I clicked it open. Inside, there wasn't jewelry. There were letters. Not love letters. Instructions. Handwritten notes in Leanne's cursive. Outlines. Schedules. A checklist. And on one of the pages, in her own words, "If Alden finds out, deny everything. Say it was emotional only. Cry early. Don't let him speak first. Blame disconnection. Say I didn't feel like myself. Chase looked like he'd been struck across the face. Leanne lunged forward. Those were just thoughts. I never planned to. Planned. I cut in, voice trembling with the weight of it. You choreographed it. You wrote the damn script. Isabel stood slowly. For the first time since this began, her hands were no longer shaking. She looked at the notes, then at Leanne, then at Chase, and then she said something I'll never forget. You deserve each other. That's the tragedy. It hit harder than any scream could have. And for a moment, no one said a word. We just stood there, surrounded by the scent of lies and ocean salt. I was going to let you leave quietly, I said, my voice almost a whisper now. But I'm not giving you the grace of mystery anymore. Leanne backed away. What does that mean? It means your parents are getting a copy of these. Your boss, his wife, anyone whose life you casually stepped on while you played house with your affair. She shook her head. You wouldn't. I already did. That's when she broke. Really broke. Not the staged tears. Not the carefully timed sniffles. But the collapse. The gasp. The desperation. Her knees buckled, and she dropped to the floor like she was drowning in gravity. Chase tried to help her. Isabel stopped him with one look. You made your choices, she said. Now sit in them. I turned away, walked to the kitchen, poured myself another glass of water. My hands weren't shaking anymore. It was almost done, but one more truth still had to come out, and I wasn't sure if I had the stomach to say it. Leanne was still on the floor when I stepped outside. I needed air. Not because I was overwhelmed, that passed hours ago, but because I needed to feel the ocean on my skin again. Not as a broken man hiding from pain, but as someone still standing, still breathing, still me. The sun was setting, that kind of surreal orange and purple glow that makes everything feel like a painting. I walked barefoot along the deck I'd built with my own hands, every board reminding me I was real, that what she did didn't erase me, that I was still here. After a few minutes, I heard footsteps behind me. I expected Isabel, but it was Chase. He stood awkwardly at the edge of the deck, one hand shoved in his pocket, the other holding his car keys. She's asking for you, he said. I didn't answer. I think she really. You should go, I said calmly. Whatever you two decide to do next, it's not going to happen here. He looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't. He just nodded, muttered something I didn't care to hear, and turned back inside. A few minutes later, their car pulled away. Isabel stepped out, watching the taillights disappear down the dirt road. She didn't look angry. Just clear. You okay? She asked. I nodded. Eventually, she came over and leaned on the railing next to me. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. There was something powerful about the silence between two people who'd survived the same storm. Do you think they'll stay together? I finally asked. She smiled faintly. Maybe. People like that sometimes do. Just long enough to hurt each other exactly the way they deserve. I let out a quiet laugh. Then we stood there a while longer, listening to the waves, letting the cold air sink in. Not like punishment, like permission, to feel everything, to let it pass. Before she left, Isabel turned to me and said something that stayed with me. You didn't lose her. You outgrew the version of you who thought she was the prize. That night, I slept in the guest room. I changed the sheets the next morning, opened every window, played music while I made coffee. I called my lawyer, started paperwork, clean break. I canceled the utilities in her name, donated the robe, burned the old playlist. And when I was done, I sat at the kitchen island, alone, exhausted, alive, and wrote something in the same notebook Isabel had left behind. Not a list, not a plan, just one sentence. This house is mine again, and so am I.